And welcome into another Central Division preview edition of Spits and Suds. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan, and today we kind of head to uncharted waters, kind of, because they make their Utah debut this year. It's the Utah Hockey Club. And from the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast, it is Tom Callahan. You may have seen him on NHL Network, also the former voice of the Nashville Predators, so he has a great view on the Central Division. Glad we could have him on today. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so kind of a generic question. When they announced that it was going to be Utah Hockey Club, were you guys surprised by this? And when do you think a actual name will transpire? Or are we going by Hockey Club? Because for some reason, Utah Hockey Club actually kind of works too.
It does, actually. It works real well. And I can tell you that one of the things that I know about everything from the inside, and I'll just try to explain this from a merchandise and jersey and all that standard, I was not very surprised when they said they were going to go with this, and they probably had to just hurry up and decide it, because what a lot of folks don't understand or just know is how far in advance you have to submit your designs, your jersey printing. This is all done 8, 10, 12 months in advance sometimes. It really depends the factories that sew these things, and especially with a switch over to Fanatics for this year, they probably wanted things earlier than normal. So I feel like this was done for a practical reason. It was easy to say, we're going to take our time, we're going to pick a winner, pick a name, pick a logo. We're going to have the time to design all that instead of trying to rush it and get it done in 2-3 weeks, because everything you read, everything you hear about the way this team came to Salt Lake was in a hurry.
Yeah.
It was not something that was planned whatsoever until all of a sudden, towards the end of the regular season, like we're almost into spring now, when Gary Bettman says, so you guys want a franchise? And and amazingly, they've pulled it off.
Yeah.
But I think logistically, that's why it's Utah Hockey Club. I was not surprised by the fact that they kind of went with the generic name for year one, because two things it does. Number one, if you're on board, and it creates a bandwagon effect, right? If you're on board right now, you have this year one merch, you have stamped yourself as a year one club member for life. You were there in the beginning. So this is something special and unique. But number two, it also will then give the team an added bump heading into year two with new merch, new name, all that stuff. I don't think the colors are going to change. I think those are what they want. But I think there's just a lot of practical reasons, but then there are also some, knock-on reasons that benefit the club anyway. But yeah, I think that's more than anything else. They didn't do it because they couldn't make up their minds fast enough or anything like that. It was just logistically impossible if they wanted jerseys for opening night.
They ran into a perfect ownership situation. I will say, I'm sure Houston and who else? Let's see. A couple of Quebec would be another one. We're like, wait, do we even have a chance? Like, it just so happens so quickly. You're absolutely right. Talk about the excitement around. I mean, Salt Lake City, great sports town, obviously supporting the Jazz, and there is a rich hockey tradition in Utah.
And just like there is in Dallas and in Texas, and actually I started my pro career way back, Texas hockey fans, in the Western Professional Hockey League.
Ooh.
I worked for teams in Abilene and San Angelo, Texas.
Nice.
So, yes. So my pro hockey roots started in Texas. Back then, there were something like 16 teams. And ever since then, I've worked in the phrase non-traditional market used to be very popular. I hate that phrase now, because I have worked hockey in Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, Arizona. There's no such thing as a non-traditional hockey market. You either like the game or you don't. And Salt Lake is another area, much like, Dallas, Fort Worth, that has history going back years and years and years, all the way back to the Salt Lake Golden Eagles of the International Hockey League. The hockey fans have been there for a long time. IHL, ECHL, Utah has a rich history, but now they're getting a chance on a big stage with the NHL. And I think it's going to show very well what kind of sports town this is.
I have received some interesting reactions when I say that I feel as though Utah will be in the wild card mix. So now that I'm talking to you representing Utah, am I that crazy to think this?
So when you look at the West as a whole, because that's what the wild card implicates, not just the Central, but I do think we know who the haves and the have-nots are for the most part. There's going to be some question marks, but those question marks are going to be from slots, say 7 to 11. I look at the Utah Hockey Club and I say to myself this is a team on the rise. They are growing, they're getting better. And this is a year I expect them to take a step forward and be team 9 or 10. If they overperform, and this is the line I've been using for months, if they overperform, if they pull a few upsets, if they win a few more games than they're supposed to, if this defense comes together faster than I expect, they will challenge for a wild card this year. I don't think that's where I would peg them this season. If you handed me $100 and said, Tom, you need to wager this on in or out of the playoffs, I'd say just outside. But if they overperform a little bit, they're inside and they're battling for that wild card spot. Next year, however, absolutely. They need to be a wild card team. And then in year 3 seasons from now, that to me is where they become the legitimate contender through the growth, the development, the drafting, the cap management that they've had. So I don't think you're out of your tree at all on that one. I think they absolutely could if it comes together. If all of a sudden, remember, this is a team that had 0 defensemen a couple of weeks before the draft. Now they have their core together, and half of it wasn't there last year. But if these guys come together, if Sergachev turns out to be amazing coming off this injury, if he's a true number one defense, he can raise their power play unit, which wasn't bad last year. But as we saw the Oilers show, you need a good power play to be successful. If that power play unit scores half a goal a game more this year, that's probably 5 more wins.
Yep.
So I don't see why not. I don't see why they couldn't be there.
I think if it does come together, and I do think it will come together, I think it's actually going to be a decor that everyone has to look at from top to bottom. I mean, you talked about the acquisition of Sergachev if he comes back, but also the acquisition of John Marino. I'm a big Sean Durzi guy. I'm also a big Michael Kesselring fan. I've followed him since his days in New Hampshire. So I like Kesselring. I like his size. I like his puck-moving ability. Ian Cole, veteran presidents, just signed Robert Bertuzzo as a depth piece to a 2-way contract. I really like the pieces they have on this decor.
I do too, and some of it is young and maturing. And I think what the Bortuzzo signing does is it gives them just that little bit more breathing room to bring some of the younger players along. But I mean, we didn't mention Yusuf Alamaki, who I think can really have a role this year.
Yep.
And one thing I will see, I see a lot of prognosticators putting Sergachev and Durzi together. I think that's too much of a good thing on one D pair. I don't know that I see that happening. I think maybe Marino Sergachev may be the mix, and then Durzi on the right side is another offensive defenseman. It's kind of like you look at Vegas. They couldn't put Pietrangelo together with Theodore. They had to figure that out and separate those two. They were both right-hand shots, mind you, but it worked out better that way. So I think that that's a little bit of what Utah Hockey Club has, is to not put those two together and split them up a little bit might be the best thing. Would I try them on the same pair for a little while? Oh, absolutely. I would try that in training camp in a couple of games, but I don't know if I see that in the regular season.
I can also see Kesselring eventually moving up to a top 4 position rather than being in a bottom 6 defenseman. Young, I think with more experience, I think he's going to be a really good defenseman. Like I said, I love his size, and I like the physicality that this defense brings to the table as well. Let's move to the forwards positions because there are some great names. Clayton Keller, just a solid NHLer, kind of lost in the mix as far as top scoring forwards because he played in Arizona. You have the youngster Logan Cooley. I'll even throw in Josh Doan. A lot of people didn't see this toward the end of the season. 11 games, 9 points. He's right now projected on a third line, but I think Josh Doan could have a breakout season as well. Some great young guns, but the name that doesn't get mentioned enough, my friend, Nick Schmaltz, and what he's been able to do. Just a solid NHL player, and you look at his time in Arizona, basically averaging 60 points a year.
You know what? This team is better top to bottom, I think, than anybody gives them credit for offensively. And even when your GM Bill Armstrong says scoring goals is not going to be our problem, and they go out and they draft some, killer forwards anyway. But at the time, we all thought, oh, they're going to pick a defenseman and they're going to try to move that defensive prospect along. But Armstrong has a little bit different plan. We didn't know at the time, but found out in the next week that defense was going to be addressed through acquisitions. And instead of taking the time to draft defensemen, develop them, which can be years, he went ahead and said, you know what, I think we're good enough up front that I can look down the road. And defensively, we need help now as we try to enter a playoff run window. So this team up front, to go back to who you're talking about, Nick Schmaltz here, is actually one of the older players on the team. Yep. He's got 2 more years left on his deal, and he has been a quiet type of leader. As you say, he's putting up, almost 60 points a season here. Durability was better last year, 79 games as opposed to 63 the 2 years before that, 52 before that. And that was the question around him. And that was kind of what was hanging around his neck when he came over from Chicago, is how healthy is he going to be? And I think that's dogged him for a couple of years. Now, if last year is more of an indication, he only misses 3 games, I would actually look for his production to go up a little bit as he enters, year 29, year 30. I think that he's really got the potential to be that leader. And, this is a team that doesn't even necessarily have its captaincy figured out yet. I would look for him to wear some type of letter at some point in here, but they really do have a good core up front. You mentioned Keller, Schmaltz, Lawson Krause is another guy I got to put out there. They've got Kerfoot for 1 more year at age 30. So they really do have a good leadership core. They've got some depth. They brought in Ian Cole in the defense, which is fantastic. Yeah. I love bringing him in. They've done a lot of smart things, and I think this team will score more goals than people realize.
And we talked about Josh Doan, Shane Doan's kid, and what is the excitement in Utah for their recent draft pick, Tija Gilna? I mean, the fact that Jerome's son, you could have Jerome's son and Shane's son on the same team. I mean, amazing pedigree there.
Yeah, the bloodline's pretty good, huh?
Yeah, it really is.
It's and 2 of the nicest guys that I remember in and around the league when I was working with Nashville. I mean, couldn't ask for better people. And to have them both in the same organization is amazing. I expect Doan's going to take a big step forward this year. Iginla, there are some folks I think who want to see him in the NHL right away. And number one, I don't think that's a plan. And number 2, it shouldn't be the plan because they want him to be a center when he comes to the NHL. They don't want him to get shoved into center, at this level and not have it work. So he's going to go back to junior, play a full year of junior at center. And I think that that's going to be huge for his development. He's dedicated to working on it, but he's already showing big time skills. He's got an elite shot. He obviously has the mental game. I mean, the apple didn't fall far from the tree on this one. So I think the excitement around him is palpable. I would love to see him in a couple of regular season games to start the year. I just don't expect him to burn his ELC unless he's just insanely good. But even then, I think they're going to try to stay patient and say, you know what, go back to the Western League, play center for a year, and then, we'll look at it in year 2 as far as, is he a full-time NHLer?
The Connor Ingram story, as far as the net minding for Utah, is a very interesting story. Kind of bounced around for a little bit. Seems like he's found a solid home with this franchise.
I like Connor Ingram. Obviously, a great story this year. And as you mentioned, was a little bit of a journeyman. Was starting to kind of go from team to team, here to there. Never been a super high paid guy. Never really gotten much of a chance, quite frankly. He never really found himself a home. And the Coyotes, it's interesting. And I apologize to Coyotes fans because they're not going to see the fruits of the labor of working under prior stingy ownership, dictating that it all had to be done through the draft. It all had to be done through value acquisitions. They're not going to see the fruits of that labor. They're not going to see, and I mean, they can, but if they do, quite frankly, they'll probably be annoyed. But he's part of that. And goaltenders a lot of times really don't tend to blossom till their late 20s anyway.
Correct.
But he's got the size. He's 6'2", 196. Again, if he could stay healthy, it's good. But his numbers got much better last year. And I think what you're going to see this year, I'm predicting his numbers to continue to rise because I think Utah will be more of a puck possession team. They're going to be more physical. They're going to be blocking shots, getting in the way, things that make life easier on a goaltender, clearing the crease. I think Ingram can gain confidence playing in front of that style. And I think that that's going to elevate his game even more. So, you know what? I mean, Vejmelka 2 years ago was supposed to be the guy, struggled a little bit last year. Ingram supplanted him. I think Ingram is the guy heading into this year. Contract year for Vejmelka. I expect him to compete. But, Ingram, this is his chance to solidify himself as a starter on this team for the next several years.
From an outside perspective, let's get your thoughts, Tom, on the Dallas Stars.
I like Dallas. The one thing I will say that Dallas runs up against that every other team in the Central will run up against is a couple of questions. Namely, how good is Nashville now? I think Nashville put themselves into the number one spot in the Central with the summer they had and probably have done so for the next 2 years. So if you're Dallas, you're really looking at Winnipeg, Colorado, yourself, Nashville, right? Those are the four halves to me in the Central Division. I really like the way Dallas plays. I think that they have a lot of excellent players. I love Robertson, huge fan. I love Ottinger. I think there's a lot of good things going on with this team. I think that Dallas has also figured out a way to really get what they can out of their youngsters now. And the dynamic is switching a little bit here, right? I mean, we're going from some of the older players to some of the younger players playing bigger and more important roles.
Yeah, Wyatt Johnston, Logan Stankoven, Maverick Bork, Liam Bixel's on his way. I mean, it's turning.
Absolutely. And so when you're, I call it flipping the keys to the kids, right? I mean, you're like, all right, here, you drive now.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what Dallas is going through. And if the transition is successful, they have just set themselves up to be competitive for the next 6, 7, 8 seasons. So I believe the organization's taken the right steps to bring these players along with veteran leadership in front of them. And now as that veteran leadership in some cases either retires or kind of phases out or reduces a role or whatever it is, that's when they're able to step into the void created and continue that dynamic and continue the work that's already been done. So I think Dallas is a playoff team. And again, I go back to Ottinger. I absolutely love him. I think he's a great goaltender. To me, he's easily top 10, top 5 NHL goaltender. And when you have that going for you, it's real tough to bet against an organization that has that in net.
Yeah, pretty amazing when you think about it that Miro Heiskanen's only 25. He's played 6 years in the NHL and, not really looked at as a kid, but 25 as a basically your top defenseman. That's quite impressive. Yeah, you mentioned Ottinger, and I think the Four Nations Cup is really important to him, Tom. I think, he wants to beat out maybe Thatcher Demko and get on that in place of All-Star Weekend, and also he's got a new contract coming. So, a lot of expectations. If Ottinger performs well this year, that number certainly is going to go up. We've seen some nice goaltending numbers, so to speak, and I think Ottinger might be above like a UC Saros. So I think payday is coming, and Wyatt Johnston's about to get paid too. So, they have some cap constraints because of all the youngsters performing, but that's kind of, the thinking. So from a Central Division standpoint, and let's go into the Western Conference. So you think top 3 will be Nashville, Dallas will be in the mix, Colorado will be in the mix, Winnipeg will be in the mix. I think all has to come together, right, in Minnesota for them to be a factor. Like I said, I like Utah. Let's go to the other conference in the West. It'll be interesting to see Vegas, how they're going to be. I think Vancouver's going to be really good. Not so sure about Calgary. So to me, there is some openings where you could potentially see 2 Central Division teams getting in the wild card, although it will be tough because that usually doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think so really this is going to depend on what I call the question mark teams. And Vancouver fans will be mad to hear me say this, but they're a question mark to me this year.
Really? Interesting.
Are they? Yes. Because are they a team that just had a good half, 2/3 of the season? Or is that really them? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if they know the answer to that. And I love Thatcher Demko, but is he going to be healthy?
Yeah, good question.
And you go down to your third string goaltender, who all of a sudden Shelobs is like a household name and incredibly popular, parlayed it into a contract. But Do you trust that guy over an 82-game season to be your starter? I don't know. And Vancouver, the other thing about Vancouver is they rattle their own cage a lot. The fan base over there, I mean, the panic button, they just kind of lay their hand on it the whole season. Everything is, should we trade this guy? Should we get rid of this guy? Should we do this? Should we do that? They never let the sleeping dog lie and see what the team is actually going to be. They always, want to see some change and some movement. Edmonton is far and away number one in that division. The Canucks, to me, have an easy chance, I'll say, to prove me wrong and come out and show that they can continue to play well in the next season. But if they get off to a slow start, Calgary's not going to be good. Anaheim's not going to be good. The Kings are a question mark. The Sharks aren't going to be good. So, to me, the Pacific is pretty wide open. Edmonton is going to be that number one team, but other than that, the fight for the 2 and the 3. So, to your theory about 5 teams from the Central, I could absolutely see that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how Jake DeBrusk does in Vancouver as well, leaving that Bruins system and playing under Rick Tocchet. It seems like he'd be that kind of Rick Tocchet kind of guy.
Well, yes, I agree with that. And I think, honestly, for the Canucks, I don't know that the bar is going to be that high because they are going to get a chance to beat up on the Sharks. They are going to get a chance to beat up on, the Ducks, and really they're going to be able to separate themselves. And as I said, Calgary is just going to be bad. They've all figured that out already, though. So really, your bar is Edmonton. If you're Vancouver, are you better than Edmonton? And that's what they have to figure out.
Yeah, it's interesting because we can call the Central Division the toughest division in hockey, but then I look in the East and I'm like, wow, Metro in the North, that's brutal too. It's just hockey. The parity in hockey is just, I think, better than ever. It's amazing.
It is, and teams will surprise you all the time. Yeah. Sometimes they go into a nosedive you didn't expect, and other teams pull it together way faster. Utah could surprise everybody this year. At Christmas, we could be talking about them sitting third in the Central somehow.
I mean, somehow that'll make me look good. So,
right, but it could if things come together because there's huge question marks on this roster, and to me, it's all on the defense, not because of the players, but because they've just never played together before.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, look forward to the matchup when they face the Dallas Stars. Knew you were going to be awesome. You are awesome. It's Tom Callahan. You can check him out on the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast. And what I tell you, Stars fans, is it's so awesome that you listen to Spits and Suds, but it's awesome if you get to listen to Tom's podcast because you really do get a different perspective and the Utah perspective, which I think really helps going into game day. So please check out his podcast. Tom, you're a beast. Thank you so much, man.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to do it for another Central Division preview right here on Spits and Suds. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great day, everyone.